Welcome to Haltix. I'm Hal, and it is Monday, the 28th, the 27th day of March. Tomorrow is the 28th, and that would, of course, be Tuesday. Today being Monday, it is the 27th, and we're going to get into it right away. If you want to join me, of course, 240-363-7190. Hope you will click subscribe. There is a subscribe button right there on the screen in front of you, and it's at the bottom right hand corner. I think it says Haltech subscribe. So it's kind of obvious what you need to do, and that will keep me going. And of course, I want to talk to you. That's why we do this program live every weekday, Monday through Friday. That would be, except when I take a day off, I've got something else going on and can't do it. Then we don't have them. But otherwise, we're live Monday through Friday, 11 a.m. Eastern time. And the goal is to talk to you, to get your viewpoints, your perspective. We try to have guests on. No guests today, just callers. If you do call in, I do want to thank Arlen for a really great guest appearance for a solid hour on Friday. I thought it went really, really well. And we had an excellent disagreement, debate, discussion about the war on Ukraine. And obviously, even by my phrasing, the war on Ukraine, I am opposed to our ongoing involvement, our help, in quotation marks, to the Zelensky government, and the support we're providing, I believe, means we're fighting this out in a proxy war to the last Ukrainian. I can't think of anything that could be worse. Kind of reminds me a little bit of Vietnam. To be honest with you, the way we're just at this point still not putting boots on the ground, but with advisors, with all that material that we're presenting to the Ukrainians, and just how devastating it is to that country. In the end, I fear, much like in Vietnam, much like Afghanistan, if we continue this process, rather than sue for peace, rather than sue for a ceasefire, rather than work out some kind of resolution with Putin, that this will lead to the complete end of Ukraine. I'm at 240-363-7190 if you want to argue with me. And again, please click that Haltix subscribe in the bottom right. I just refreshed that screen there. We're going to focus a little bit on now crime. And this story really, really upset me. That is Rajon Taylor on the screen there. Rajon Taylor. I just quickly wanted to make sure I got his name right. Rajon Taylor. He is on death row in Terre Haute, Indiana, federal penitentiary. And the Biden administration is fighting tooth and nail to keep him there. So this report that I'm going to call it, whatever you want to call it, I'm not a reporter. I don't know if I'm even a journalist. I am a online pundit, a live streamer. But this story, to my way of thinking, reflects everything wrong with the way the Democrats handle this issue. And I mean, I'm an anti-death penalty advocate. I don't think we should be killing people. I don't think the state should be in the business of killing people. I used to think, well, if it's a war crime, if it's, what we did to the folks at Abu Ghraib, maybe there should be a death penalty for people like John Yoo and George W. Bush. Maybe there should have been. I always thought, well, Hitler's the exception, right? The one exception, the person who just mass murders 6 million people or more, probably more, maybe many more. That's the person that should be executed. But I've come around to the thinking that even in a case like that, you're still creating a martyr, much as we did with the guy behind 9/11, whose name now, of course, escapes me, really, really tall Saudi, who was behind 9/11. Even in a case like that, you're just creating a martyr. It's much better to have these people in prison than it is to have them executed by the state. I cannot see any benefit whatsoever that could possibly accrue from killing Rajon Taylor. And based on the article by the AP here, which just came out yesterday, you can see it says it on the screen yesterday. His lawyer seemed to think he has a pretty strong case. He hoped that with Biden's election, there would be a good chance, Mr. Taylor did, a good chance that his claims that racial bias and other trial errors led him on the federal death row there in Terre Haute. No, not at all. And Rajon Taylor's hopes were not only limited to himself. Death penalty opponents expected that Biden would act on his promise. And remember, there were other promises that he made that we are waiting for them to be kept, such as federal student debt cancellation. But here, by $15 minimum wage, here Biden said he was going to end capital punishment on the federal level and would work on ending it in states that still carry out executions. Instead, Biden has taken no steps toward fulfilling that promise. I think this is just, it's, first of all, it's immoral. And this is, by the way, this story is not going to be just simply bashing Democrats, bashing Biden. Republicans are as bad or worse, really. And we'll see why, how they're even worse. But is not being as bad, that's my question to you, is not being as bad as Republicans good enough for you? Because it really isn't for me. And in some ways, I think you could make an argument. I could make an argument. I don't ultimately believe that Biden's stance on capital punishment is worse than or even as bad as Trump's was. But it's darn bad. So he told us, and this is one area where you could say it's worse. Did Biden lie? According to the AP, he said he was going to end capital punishment on the federal level. Has not done it. Work at ending it. He has taken no steps towards fulfilling that promise. And Rajon Taylor's lawyers are saying that everything they're trying to do to protect Rajon Taylor is just getting the back of the hand from the Justice Department. And it's not inaction, right? Because it's so Biden said he was going to end it. It's not that he hasn't ended it. It's not that he's sitting on his hands. It's that they're fighting vigorously in courts to maintain the sentences of death row inmates. So instead of going to court and saying these were bad decisions, this was wrong, overturn, reverse this death penalty, they're continuing to fight it in courts. Now, I promised you I was not going to simply bash Democrats and say they're worse or as bad as. Although, to be fair to that argument, Biden said, I'm not going to have death penalty. We're going to end it on the federal level. And instead, he's continuing keeping people on death row. Whereas Trump said, I'm going to, kill people, and he did. But to be fair to Biden, his Justice Department, his Attorney General, Merrick Garland, is saying, or has temporarily paused. In other words, the Justice Department is not at this time carrying out executions. Now, I don't know if they get to simply, I guess based on this article, they can simply stop it. So that's a good thing. That I'm going to give a slight, credit, right? That's good. We don't want people executed. I don't want them executed. The last thing I want, well, there's things I probably want even less than a moratorium or an end to death row. But it's high on my list. I don't want my government killing people. Now, I know for some of you, what's more scary is angry, unwashed, rural folks descending on the Capitol and wandering through it and threatening Congress members who are shivering under their desks. I know that's scary. It is scary. I'm not saying it isn't. But what I think is scarier is when the state is killing people, and we know we've executed innocent people. I think it's scarier when we elect somebody who says there's going to be an end to the death penalty and then simply washes his hands of that position. Now, again, I'm glad that the executions have been paused. I think that's great as far as it goes, but it's not far enough. And as you read, lawyers for some of the over 40 death row inmates say they've seen no meaningful changes to the Justice Department's approach under Biden and Trump. In other words, we're still going to argue. When I say we, the federal government, we are going to continue, the state is going to continue to argue that those people should be killed, that they should be killed. Now, they're not being killed today because of the moratorium, but what happens when that's lifted, either by Merrick Garland or when a president like a Bill Clinton or a Donald Trump takes office, or a George W. Bush takes office and says, we're going to kill more people. That's the end of it. Then they're back to being killed. And the thing is, you could say, well, at least they can sleep easy now. Well, no, it's still hanging over their heads. And if, let's say you're innocent, you didn't commit the crime for which you were convicted, or that didn't commit the crimes for which you were convicted. And your hope is, well, maybe one day I'll be free. Maybe one day somebody will come forward who will admit that they're guilty. Maybe DNA evidence will clear me of this horrible crime that I've been sentenced to die for, to be killed for. But if you're executed, then that hope is vain. So you're on death row, and you're thinking all the time, I might be killed before I'm the exoneration. It's terrifying. And this is the policy that your Democratic president, that many of you have said, oh my gosh, we need him so badly, we can't have another 4 years of Trump. And do I think this policy isn't as bad as Trump's? Yeah, I do. Because I believe Trump, they said, killed 13 people in his last months in office. So yeah, Trump isn't quite, isn't on the same level. He's worse. But it's not good enough. Is it? Maybe you think it is. It's not good enough not to be Trump. If you think it is good enough not to be Trump, tell me. 240-363-7190. But I don't see that. I can't. And I can and Democrats, I mean, we've got to come up with this. Is why I'm such a fan. Why I believe we must have that alternative to both parties. Because the Democratic solution seems to me almost worse. I mean, for one thing, you're getting the worst of all worlds. The Biden administration is afraid. Okay, they don't want to be viewed as soft on crime. The property crimes are through the roof. I don't know about violent crimes right now. My understanding is murder rates have been declining. I didn't look into that. I know that when I was out in California, the murder rate had been steadily dropping. I think it's still lower by a significant margin than it was 30 years ago. Better policing is a big reason for that. But property crime is, it's remarkable. Where I live, cars are being stolen right out of my neighborhood. People can't leave anything, and you shouldn't, in their cars without smashes and grabs. So we've got a situation where there's a lot of crime. Democrats are viewed to a degree as soft on crime, and Biden is trying to finesse that by pushing against any reconsideration of death penalty sentences that have already been in place. But he also did make that promise he was going to end the death penalty, so he's also put a moratorium on it. It seems to me this is how you lose. This is how you lose elections. You take a half step. The Republicans are still going to attack him as soft on crime. Look, we're not killing enough people. He's not killing people anymore. That'll be the Republican response. And then progressives, Democrats like me, progressives, forget about the Democrat, progressives like me are going to say, wait, what the hell is this moratorium? Would you just simply commute their sentences to life imprisonment, please? I honestly don't think that this issue is that. I think the crime issue is huge. I think Democrats lose on crime over and over. We'll get to a little bit more why. This is part of it though, because they're wishy-washy. They can't come out and just say, yes, we have to be ready to prosecute people who commit property crimes. We have to be willing to prosecute people who do bad things, but no, we shouldn't kill them. No, we're not going to kill them. No, we're not going to keep people in jail who sell drugs because that is not a violent crime. No, we're not going to even prosecute drug crimes because that makes the situation worse. Democrats need to stake out a firm position and hold to it. And as usual, they don't. In fact, they have been unclear, arbitrary in a lot of decisions. And this also is what this article points out. So let me get back to it a little bit. I'll show a little bit more from this slide deck, which I think represents all that's wrong with the Democratic approach. It's not consistent. It's not something that you can, kind of foresee or understand. It's just a haphazard. And it's incredibly frustrating for the lawyers, of course. And I don't think it helps them in the least politically. I guess it does with some folks because they say, well, they're not as bad. They're not as bad. Trump was worse. Trump was worse. To me, that's not good enough. Maybe for you, that is. Maybe not being Trump is good enough. Not for me. So when Garland announced we're not going to kill people for a while, the state isn't going to kill people, he did point out there's a disproportionate impact on people of color, which is true, and it's arbitrary. It's inconsistent. And to be, and again, better than Trump, he has not authorized a single new death penalty case and or not as bad as Trump, has reversed decisions by previous administrations to seek it, not reversing already imposed sentences of death, not commuting them, but simply we're not going to pursue them. And some they have pursued because they were previously decided by Trump or maybe by Obama to pursue them if they're that far. It says previous administration. So here you have Patrick Crusius. Now he talks about racism. Patrick Crusius is white. He killed over 20 Latinos in Texas. He has been described by his attorney, so take that with whatever grain of salt. I'm going to assume the court agreed that he has severe lifelong neurological and mental disability. I mean, how could you not, right? I mean, if you're going to go into a Walmart and just start shooting people up, I mean, I'd say we as a society clearly have severe lifelong neurological and mental disabilities if we're going to continue to let people walk around with assault weapons and walk into supermarkets and start blowing people away. There's obviously something very, very wrong with our society, with us as a nation. But regardless, clearly this guy is mentally ill, and I don't believe he should be sentenced to death. And this is a horrific crime. I don't believe anyone should be sentenced to death. And I am glad that the death sentence is not being sought for Patrick Crusius in federal court. But remember, there's also state charges. It's Texas, which kills a lot of people. The state of Texas kills a lot of people. So it's kind of almost meaningless that the feds aren't charging him with death sentence or aren't seeking it. It's kind of meaningless. But it's also a little bit question the arbitrariness here, because we saw in that first slide I showed you a man who is under sentence of death right now, Rajon Taylor. And as I and he's a black man. There's a Rajon right there. He's African American. I don't know what the crime is he's charged with, but they're not commuting his sentence. Biden Justice Department, Merrick Garland, is not commuting his sentence. Yet at the same time, they are refusing. They made a decision not to seek the death penalty against a white man, Patrick Crusius. Now, again, my preference, my strong belief is no one should be killed by the state. I mean, if you have a situation where a police officer needs to kill somebody who's holding a hostage, there's a life or death situation, it's defending others, that's different. I don't believe that there should ever be a conscious decision by the state to kill somebody in custody. That should never, ever be the case. So I'm glad that Merrick Garland decided not to seek the death penalty against Patrick Crusius. I question how much it means, since he could also be killed by the state of Texas, which I assume may do that. But I also say, well, if your real concern, or if one of your major concerns, and it should be, is disproportionate impact on people of color, why do you choose to allow a death penalty case, or why do you choose to allow Rajon Taylor to remain on death row while not seeking death against a man who killed over 20 people in a racist attack? I mean, it's very arbitrary. And again, this is what frustrates progressives, frustrates lawyers, frustrates people who want a better government, a more responsive government. This is not smart. This is not good politics. It clearly reeks, does it not, of arbitrariness. So Democrats are losing this, and they're losing it because they're inconsistent, and because they can't claim to be tough on crime with much credibility, and at the same time, they can't claim to be, humane, because there's no humaneness here. All right, call me if you want to join me, 240-363-7190. I know a lot of you watch after the fact. Click this how to subscribe. Love to talk to you. If you can, and remember, it shows it right there, 11 to noon Eastern. All right, let's continue our talk about how Democrats screw everything up when it comes to crime issues. And it may be a little bit unfair. I know I'm kind of being a little bit, I'm painting with a broad brush here, because I'm going to attribute to a degree what a couple of relatively high-profile liberal Democrats have said. But you're talking about, so out in San Francisco, and this is a very recent, and this has made the rounds of the internet. I don't think anyone's really talked about the death penalty lately, although that was a great article by the AP, and I'm very pleased that article about the death penalty came out yesterday, was covered by the Baltimore Sun, covered by the Washington Post. So they did a nice job reprinting it. I showed you the version from the AP. It's the same exact copy. It's just different. Some pictures are different images. But I showed you the AP because that's where that's who syndicated it. In San Francisco, here's what Snehal Antani posted. And look at the number of views that Mr. Antani's post gathered just since the 17th on Twitter. A teammate visiting San Francisco for an offsite. I guess they had a meeting. I don't know, offsite. Called me frantically last night after dinner at Fisherman's Wharf. They came back to a smashed car window, 2 stolen backpacks, $10,000 in gear lost, passports gone, etc. So that was last week in San Francisco, or 2 weeks ago, rather, 10 days ago. And then Snehalatani continues, and my teammates will be scarred forever. Being robbed hits you at your core, especially when it's thousands of dollars loss. There's no downtown recovery without an aggressive push for safety. And then he gives that message to the mayor there, London Breed. I want, if the mayor of San Francisco's name is London, does that mean that the mayor of London's name is San Francisco, or maybe just Francisco? I don't know. Just a little digression. Sorry, folks. There's your Hal humor. It's hilarious. It's a big deal. It's a big deal. This happens in San Francisco consistently. I can report that in my former employer's situation in San Francisco, they had gear stolen as well. They left the car in broad daylight on the street, I guess around, I think it was around Post Street, if I remember correctly. I'm not sure. I could get that wrong. Van Ness area, somewhere around there. And they went out for lunch. They left a lot of camera equipment visible. Now, I'm not going to say that was smart. I mean, I've never left, when I go out, I don't leave anything visible in my car. I don't leave it in my driveway. I don't have anything. If I leave anything in my car, it's in the trunk. So I'm not saying this was brilliant by either my former employers or by Mr. Antoni's teammate to leave visible, valuable equipment in a car. That's not a good idea. But it still sucks to have your car obviously broken into. It's really, really bad. This actually did once happen to me. I mean, a long time ago. Streets have always, I left some skis in my car. They're not in that value, a couple $100, right? Not old used skis. Nothing great about them. Right? I figured, who's going to steal these? And they did, because I couldn't fit them. They're long. They're 200 centimeters, whatever that is in inches, but it's my height, 6 feet long. And I couldn't really fit them in my trunk. I should have put it in a garage. This was in the streets of Manhattan near Grand Central. It's not a bad area, right? I mean, that's not really relevant. And someone smashed into the car and sold the skis. And I mean, I can't believe they got more than 40. I mean, nothing. They weren't worth anything. They weren't valuable equipment. Sucked. I still remember it. Was I scarred for life? No, but I wasn't happy about it. I had to get the car window repaired. It was bad. It was really, really bad. There's no, I mean, what are you going to say? And Antoni says will be scarred forever. We need an aggressive push for safety. I agree with that. The response just doesn't. I mean, I'm trying to understand. So this guy, is it Hamasaki? He's a lawyer. He was a San Francisco commissioner, police commissioner, and lost his reelection campaign. But I'm just trying to understand this kind of comments that people make are just, I mean, what are you thinking? So this is a San Francisco liberal Democrat in response, instead of like, that sucks, it's really bad, blah, blah, blah. Interesting, would getting your car window broken and some stuff stolen leave you scarred forever? Is this what, I mean, where does that come from? This guy is a Democratic Party politico. He was in I believe, the police commissioner's board oversight. And you saw, I won't say the exact same attitude whatsoever from Chesa Boudin, who I believe was recently recalled. Maybe he won his recall election. Call me if you want to tell me, 240-363-7190. That's not the way you respond. Seth Rogen wrote not about this, but about a similar situation. Seth Rogen, liberal Democrat, I believe in San Francisco also, wrote about a big, Hollywood star, multimillionaire, elite, affluent. These kinds of events can be devastating for people. Your business is photography, your business is videography, you're some sort of a techie, and your valuable equipment is stolen. Your car needs to be, you got to get the glass repaired. You got to replace that equipment. It's a problem. It's a real problem for people, and it's painful. Now, are you scarred forever? I wasn't scarred forever by having my skis stolen, but I mean, my situation was very different. I was a young kid. I was able to get new skis. It wasn't that big a deal. It didn't cost me money in the sense of lost wages or lost income. And as I mentioned, they weren't very valuable. This is a totally different situation. I don't get that response. And I think and Hamasaki is getting blasted for it as a Democrat. Now, I get he's one Democrat. I get Seth Rogen is one Hollywood guy. But if you're going to show zero compassion or empathy for victims of crime, you're going to lose hundreds of millions of Americans. It's crazy talk. And for Democrats to claim, well, we're the party of compassion. So, we're concerned about crimes to people, not property, crimes of violence. Well, then why aren't we saying to Joe Biden, don't kill people? Not only that, commute death penalty sentences that are already on the books. We can't have either. It's not only that we can't have our cake and eat it too, we can't have either the cake or eat it. We're not compassionate towards the people that are being under the ultimate sentence, some of whom are probably innocent, all of whom shouldn't be killed by the state. And at the same time, we're not showing any real empathy for victims of crime. So, of course, we're going to lose. 240-363-7190. So what is the right answer? Now, I'm going to say in San Francisco, it's going to be really tough to implement the right answer. It's very, now San Francisco is super rich. And what you have in San Francisco is you have these extraordinary billionaires, right? They've got that billionaires row there up on, I think it's Pacific Avenue. And the houses are unbelievable. And this is in a beautiful city overlooking the bay. Probably the most beautiful. Is it the most beautiful in the world? I'm going to say yes, it is. I'm going to say it is. Well, at least the situation is. Maybe I haven't been to I haven't been to Rome. I don't know. Maybe Rome is more beautiful. I don't. But man, when you're standing up there on Telegraph Hill or you're out on Nob Hill, you look all around. You see all that water and the beautiful bay and the mountains. I mean, it's ridiculous. It's glorious. Out by the beautiful museum towards the Golden Gate. I can't remember what it is called. It's got a French name. Légion d'honneur. I mean, it's as as beautiful as it gets anywhere, and you get the human landscape, the human scape, which is the buildings, and then at the same time the incredible nature. So the land, the real estate's valued probably as high as anywhere in the world. And still, of course, there's lots of poor people. There's lots of people. There's a lot homeless on every block. I mean, this is a recipe for crime of every type. And I understand it's not the homeless people who are doing the smashes and grabs. Those are organized thieves. But again, because there's so much money, and you say, well, Hal, you just said these could be just working class people who leave their equipment in their car. Absolutely. But they are not necessarily the billionaires in San Francisco. In fact, I'm sure they're not. But if you're going to be in the tech industry and you're working in it, very many of you will have fancy, nice equipment you need for your job. May not even be yours, maybe owned by your business. Maybe it's a small business that owns the equipment. Whatever, you're hurt, you're harmed, you're a victim of crime. Don't make fun of it. Don't say, oh, interesting, yeah, you're really going to be scarred for life. That's a load of crap. That's how we lose elections. join me, 240-363-7190. And by the way, click that like, click subscribe. That's how you help me out here. What's this? And it's very hard to do this in San Francisco. San Francisco, and by the way, those kinds of conditions where you see super wealth juxtaposed by poverty, we've seen this before. This is not news. I mean, in Europe, in England, in London, incredibly rich city, seat of the empire, right? 19th, end of the 19th, end of the end of the 18th century, so 1790s, early 1800s, earlier in that century, earlier in the 18th century, mid 1700s. London's incredibly wealthy, so much money coming in from the colonies because they don't pay. Many of the workers are enslaved. They're not paid. The profits are immense. The king, the queen, the retainers, the nobility are so wealthy. And at the same time, the crime rates are through the roof. You cannot take the Old Kent Road from London to the Channel without every few hundred yards finding a hanging body. If you were a thief or you were accused of being a thief and the authorities, the sheriff, believed the accusation, they'd hang you. That was a warning. That was a warning to others. Hey, this is what will happen to you. Didn't really go very far because people were many starving or their lives sucked, and they were like, well, hanging ain't much worse than what I got right now. And if you were successful at it, you lived pretty good for a while. So that's kind of like what we have right now in America, that incredible juxtaposition, people sleeping on the streets, sleeping under bridges, and at the same time, living like kings and queens in their billionaires row. So what is the solution? Is there a solution? I think there's a solution. I think the solution is you got to attack the poverty and you've got to also attack the great wealth. It's not enough to just make sure everyone has a place to live, although we have to do that. But it's not enough. We've got to make sure not only that everyone has a place to live, but nobody has too much. Nobody's too rich. And how do we do that? I'll tell you what. It's not hard to figure out how to do it in terms of like what policies would get us there. That's not hard. I think those policies are pretty darn obvious. And I actually wrote this with regard to homelessness, but it goes to crime as well. This was in response to, and let me see, I guess there's a little bit of cutoff. Let me get that there. There we go. See if I can get this all on your screen for you. How do you do this in San Francisco? How do you get people to vote for this? So I don't know. I don't know that there's an answer. I don't know how you do it. I think what you have to do is this has to be a national policy. Regarding the housing crisis, which is all too real as any trip to a downtown city demonstrates. Well, how does that? Because you can see the homeless people on the street. Answers are much more public housing with apartments starting at $0 per month for that too. Well, yes. And it shouldn't be like a homeless shelter. It should actually be an apartment. And if you get a job and you say, well, if you give people housing, why would they even think about getting a job? Well, you know what? Because it's nice to have a little money in your pocket. Even if you have an apartment, even if you get your SNAP assistance so you're not starving to death, and you have a place to live, you know what? It's nice to have a little money in your pocket. It's nice to be able to go out every now and then and have someone else cook for you. It's nice to go out every now and then, maybe buy some nicer clothes than you've been wearing. So people are still going to be incentivized to work. Another option, you got to give cash payouts to renters, people who maybe they're living in private apartments, privately owned apartments. We need a real jobs program. We've got to make sure that everyone who wants to work and can work has a job that is consistent with their skill set. I'm not saying to employers, if somebody can't do their job, they don't work, if they're not industrious, you can fire them, yes. But we're saying at the same time, if you are hardworking, if you are industrious, you're not going to be without work for long. And we need to protect unions. We also need to tax the rich at much, much higher rates. There has to be a compression. We talk about there's been a compression. The wages of working class people have been going up more than of the middle class and of the upper middle class. There has been a compression of late. I talked about this with Orlin on Friday, but the super rich are getting richer still. Partly the stock market, partly because the salaries for top executives have continued to grow at almost exponential rates. So we need that real compression. If you compress wages, so people at the bottom are making more and people at the top are making much less, then builders aren't going to just be building the luxury homes. In fact, they would stop building those ridiculous luxury homes on 3-acre lots with 20 rooms because nobody could afford them. In the 100 years ago, 120 years ago in New York City, builders built tenements because there were unemployment was very low. There were a lot of problems. I'm not saying it was the perfect time, but unemployment was very low and there was less inequality by the early 20th century. And so if you built housing for lower middle class and working class people, you made a profit. Now you don't really make much of a profit because they can't afford it. Even for renters, they can't afford it. And the profits are so much greater if you build luxury apartments and luxury houses. So that's the solution. Good luck getting that passed in San Francisco. You really think that the uber rich in San Francisco are going to vote to raise, and this is like the most liberal city in America. They're not going to vote to raise their estate taxes. They're not going to vote to, and you might say, well, so a rich guy, billionaire, maybe they'll say, okay, well, we'll raise our estate tax. Because what do we care? We'll be dead. Except what about their kids and their grandkids? They're not going to like that. They're not going to support that. Those 6, 7, 8-figure salaried techies, they're not going to vote to raise their marginal tax rates. They're going to do everything possible to stop it. So you're not going to get this passed in San Francisco. You're not going to get higher tariffs. Apple, Samsung executives, they like they like bringing in cheap manufactured goods from Asia. It makes them higher profits. Sure as heck don't want more protections for unions either. So again, you're not going to see that passed in San Francisco. But it is, they're not going to want more public housing. Look, it's bad enough having people sleeping on the subway grate or in the BART station in front of your apartment. But the last thing we want are working class apartments. That would really bring down the value of our towers. So you're not going to get that passed in San Francisco, but you could get it passed if the Democrats, I believe you could get it passed, if this was their platform across the country. It could happen. The problem is, Democratic Party is not your party. It's not my party. It is the party of Silicon Valley. It is the party of Hollywood. It is the party of Wall Street. It is not the party of Main Street. And until it becomes, in reality, the party of Main Street, I see no hope for improvement in our country. I hate to leave it on that depressing note. Call me tomorrow if you want to argue with me. I'm out of here. Have a great day. It's politics.